The casual challenge. Morning light filtered through the tall windows of Lincoln High School's north wing, scattering pale beams across the gleaming linoleum floors. In classroom 204, Mr. Caldwell, known for his sharp mind and occasionally cutting humor, stood before the whiteboard, marker in hand. He had just wrapped up a rigorous lesson on derivatives, and the final bell rang, prompting students to collect their notebooks and drift toward the door. At the rear of the room, Marcel Thompson paused in his task. Marcel was the school's night janitor, a tall, lean man in navy coveralls, whose neatly coiled mop and bucket were as familiar as the security guard's flashlight. Outside of work, he attended Brookfield Community College classes on weekends. His schedule balanced cleaning corridors with algebra homework, but calculus had always been beyond his reach. Tonight, however, would prove that limits and integrals were far more than textbook abstractions. As the last student filed out, Mr. Caldwell tapped the board with his marker and called out, "Marcel." The name echoed through the emptying room, and Marcel felt his heart skip. He set his mop aside and stepped forward, uncertainty layering his calm demeanor. Behind him, the bucket wheels squeaked against the floor. Mr. Caldwell drew a deep breath, then scribbled deliberately, "Integral from 0 to 1 of x squared times the square root of 1 minus x squared dx." He turned with a raised eyebrow. "Let's have some fun," he said, voice carrying over the sudden hush. "You've been here long enough, Marcel. Show us what you know." He gestured to the chalkboard. "Go ahead, solve this." Marcel's throat tightened. He had never taken a calculus course. His weekend studies at community college covered English, history, basic statistics, but never integrals of composite functions. A wave of embarrassment washed over him as a few students who lingered pressed against the glass window, phones raised. Mr. Caldwell offered a wry smile. "Don't worry, I'm only joking. But let's see what happens." Swallowing, Marcel approached the board. He picked up a piece of chalk, feeling its cool texture against his fingertips, and cleared his throat. "Mr. Caldwell, I haven't formally studied calculus," he began, voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "But I know a bit of trigonometry and algebra. Maybe I can attempt a substitution and see how far I get." A murmur rippled through the classroom. Mr. Caldwell folded his arms, leaning against his desk, anticipation playing across his features. Marcel squared his shoulders and lifted the chalk. "First," he said, writing x equals sine theta, x equals sine theta. "We substitute x with sine theta, sine theta, sine theta. Then dx equals cos theta d theta dx equals cos t d theta, and 1 minus x squared. The square root of 1 minus x squared becomes 1 minus sin squared theta equals cos t. The square root of 1 minus sin squared theta equals cos theta. The limits change too. When x equals 0, theta equals 0. When x equals 1, theta equals pi over 2. The students watched, rapt. Marcel's letters were neat, his reasoning clear. He stepped aside to give space and continued. "So the integral becomes the integral from 0 to pi over 2 of sine squared theta times cosine squared theta d theta." He paused, glanced at Mr. Caldwell, then wrote beneath, "Use the identity. Sin subin the tychos admirada. Antifrac 1 4 rare sin 2 2 rare the red. Thus rare and antifrac 1 4 nint 0 API 2 sin 2 su arnada. Jadada. Ram." His hand moved confidently. "Next, apply. From sin su in alpha. Rare and antifrac 1 2 1 and QS 2 in alpha. So we have Wadifrac 1 rus 4 int wo. API 2 Wadifrac 1 2 biagle 1. Y is 4 as theta in bigar d theta. Wadifrac 1 8 in tau OPI 2 no biagle 1 Y is 4 in theta a bigar d theta." Marcel stepped back, letting the board display the transformed integral. He pointed to each term, explaining as though in a lecture. "Now split the integral. Xchart fraction 1. A. Left nint. Dro. API 2 1 L dij theta. Rint. Dro. API 2 ecos 4. Theta dj theta right." The first integral is simply theta from 0 to pi over 2, giving pi over 2. The second integral of cos 4 theta cos 4 theta cos 4 t is sin 4 tha 4 out of fracpacot os in 4 cota theta. 4 plus 4 sin 4 thus, evaluated from 0 to p to 2 odd pi 2 p per 2, which is 0, because sin 4 or 4 or p2, sin 2p, 0 sin, per times frac here pi mar 2, sin 2 pi, 0 sin 4 times 2 pi, equals sin 2 pi equals 0. He boxed each result, then wrote the final answer in bold. 18 times pi squared equals pi to the power of 16. A moment of stunned silence followed. Mr. Caldwell blinked, then let out a low whistle. The students, mouths agape, exchanged amazed glances. Some dropped their phones, others scribbled furiously to record each step. Marcel set the chalk down gently and stepped away. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat. Remarkable, he admitted, voice soft. Absolutely remarkable. He paused, scanning the smug pride on Marcel's face as the janitor returned to his mop. My apologies for the challenge, Marcel. I didn't expect... His voice trailed off. Marcel offered a modest nod and picked up his mop, returning to his duties with silent dignity. As he wiped along the baseboards, echoes of astonishment rippled through the classroom. In that echo, Marcel heard not ridicule, but respect. The respect of peers who had glimpsed his intellect for the first time. Later that day, as Marcel emptied his bucket in the utility closet, Mr. Caldwell slipped in. Marcel, he said quietly, might I speak with you? Marcel paused and nodded. They stepped into the corridor's muted light. Caldwell ran a hand through his hair. I owe you an apology. That was insensitive of me. You clearly know your way around mathematics. Marcel wiped his hands on a rag. I appreciate that, sir. I've been studying on my own. I want to get better. Caldwell's expression softened. If you're serious, I'd like to offer you unofficial tutoring, after school in my classroom. I think you, and others, could benefit. Marcel looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. Thank you. I would welcome that. As Marcel stepped back into classroom 204 that afternoon for the first of many extra sessions, he felt the weight of his mop bucket replaced by the promise of possibility. The casual joke had ignited something larger. The uncovering of latent talent, the reshaping of expectations. And in the silent sweep of his cleaning rhythm, Marcel carried the knowledge that he was more than the school's janitor. He was its newest scholar, and perhaps its most unlikely hero. Ripple effects. The day after Marcel's remarkable chalkboard demonstration, Lincoln High School buzzed with an electric energy. Students who once hurried between classes without a glance at classroom 204 now paused in the hallway, whispering in hushed tones. Lockers clanged, footsteps echoed, and every corridor seemed charged with anticipation. Marcel, meanwhile, moved through his janitorial rounds as quietly as ever, sweeping debris into his dustpan with the same steady rhythm. But now each swipe of his broom carried far more significance. By mid-morning, word of Marcel's flawless solution had spread to every corner of the campus. Texts flew between friends. Dude, did you see Marcel rock that integral? I swear that was college-level math. Snapshots of the board appeared in group chats, complete with red circles around each substitution and identity. Some students replayed their phone videos, marveling at how confidently Marcel had navigated unfamiliar territory. In classroom 204, an unplanned calculus club was already forming. A handful of seniors, future STEM majors, lingered after Mr. Caldwell's first period session to go over yesterday's integral. The empty desks filled up. One student unlocked his laptop to run a symbolic integrator app, another leafed through a calculus textbook, and a third sketched Marcel's steps in rainbow-colored pens. Under the fluorescent lights, the equations felt alive. Mr. Caldwell stood at the front, a mixture of pride and residual embarrassment tugging at his expression. He cleared his throat. All right, everyone, he began, voice steadier than he felt. Today we're going to review Marcel's method. He demonstrated a powerful technique, something we'll all benefit from understanding. A ripple of applause broke out among the half-dozen students. Mr. Caldwell managed a small smile and tapped his marker against the board. Let's start with the substitution he chose and then move into the half-angle identity. Questions are encouraged. Meanwhile, down the hallway, Principal Hargrove was receiving an unusual flurry of emails. Department chairs forwarded news clippings from the school newsletter. Janitor solves calculus problem on first try. Even the superintendent's office had flagged the story. Hargrove massaged his temples and glanced at the clock. 10:15 a.m. He called his secretary. "Ms. Wren, please schedule a meeting for me with Mr. Caldwell and Marcel for this afternoon," he said, closing the door to his office. In the cafeteria, lunchtime was in full swing, and the seating charts had been upended. Tables once reserved for jocks or theater kids now hosted animated discussions about trigonometric substitutions. Marcel usually entered the lunch line discreetly, but today a circle of curious students parted to let him pass. "Hey, Marcel," called Devon, a junior who had struggled with AP calculus for weeks. "Mind if I sit with you?" Marcel paused, nodding politely. He scooped a salad onto his tray and carried his lunch to a long table. Devon slid in beside him, 3 friends trailing. "I just wanted to say thanks," Devon said. "You showed us we can actually do this stuff." Marcel looked up, surprised by the sincerity in Devon's eyes. He tucked a stray mop handle behind him and replied quietly, "Keep practicing. You've got this." The group around them leaned in, peppering Marcel with questions. "How did you know to use that half-angle identity? Can you explain why the sine of 2 theta shows up?" Marcel answered each patiently, using his tray as an impromptu tabletop. With careful diagrams in ketchup and mustard, he sketched the unit circle and pointed out identities. Laughter mixed with learning as ketchup dripped and a stray Dijon line formed a sine curve across the plastic tray. Back in classroom 204 that afternoon, the doors remained open. Chairs lined up facing the whiteboard, now crammed with yesterday's leftover equations. A sign taped to the door proclaimed, "Marcel's Math Hour, all welcome." A motley crew of underclassmen, seniors, and even some teachers drifted in. Mr. Caldwell had stepped aside, allowing Marcel to lead the session. With chalk in hand, Marcel walked through problems he'd selected. Area under curves, substitution techniques, and even a sneak peek at integration by parts. The atmosphere was electric, no longer an after-school joke, but a genuine lecture hall experience. At one point, a sophomore named Kira raised her hand. "Marcel, how did you get so confident up here?" He paused, glancing toward the open hallway beyond the glass panels. "Honestly," he began, voice steady, "I was nervous at first. But I focused on the steps I knew from algebra and trigonometry. Once I saw the path, I trusted the process." He traced a new problem on the board and invited the group to participate. Murmurs of, "I think we should," and "What if we try?" filled the space. Word of the impromptu math hour reached beyond the building. Local education reporters swung by to record video. Cameras rolled as Marcel explained limits, and students answered follow-up questions. An anchor's voice crackled over the PA system announcing, "Coming up, Live from Lincoln High, How a Night Janitor is Reshaping a Campus." A small crowd pressed cameras against the glass door, and Marcel felt the spotlight warming his back. That evening, Marcel returned to classroom 204 alone, long after the cameras had packed up. He swept the floor meticulously, erasing footprints and chalk dust alike. The equations on the board still glowed under the fluorescent lights. He straightened a chair, ran a damp mop across the corners, and finally stepped back. As he locked up, Mr. Caldwell emerged from the hallway, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He offered one to Marcel. "Thought you could use this," he said. Marcel accepted with a small smile. "I'm sorry I made that joke," Caldwell continued. "I honestly didn't expect you to solve the entire problem. You've outperformed many of my students." Marcel looked at the coffee cup, steam curling upward. "Thank you, sir. I've been working hard, trying to prove to myself I could do it." Caldwell nodded thoughtfully. "I think it's time we make this official. How would you feel about an after-school tutoring program, where you help other students under my supervision?" Marcel's eyes lit up. "I'd be honored." Over the next week, notices went up on bulletin boards. Peer Supplementary Math Tutoring, led by Marcel Thompson, room 204. Sign-up sheets filled quickly. Even teachers scheduled recommendation passes for struggling students. The ripple effects of a single classroom challenge had grown into a wave of collective determination. As the October leaves turned crimson and gold outside the window panes, Lincoln High buzzed with renewed academic energy. Marcel, once accustomed to the invisible rhythms of mopping and cleaning, found himself at the center of a movement, one sparked by an offhand prank and fanned by his own quiet perseverance. In the days ahead, he would face new challenges, but for now, the school celebrated that learning truly belonged to everyone. And in every swipe of his broom and every chalk mark on the board, Marcel carried the promise of possibility forward, one step, one equation at a time. Unlikely alliances. By late October, Marcel Thompson's story had spread beyond the halls of Lincoln High. Word of the night janitor who solved a college-level calculus integral became a topic on neighborhood social media groups, community forums, and even a segment on the local morning news. When cameras appeared on campus one crisp Tuesday morning, Marcel had become accustomed to their whir and flash, yet he remained as modest as ever, quietly stacking his mop wringer and tucking stray chalk dust into his pocket as he went about his rounds. That morning, Marcel arrived at classroom 204 before dawn. The incandescent bulbs above the whiteboard flickered on, revealing Mr. Caldwell's neatly scrawled notice. Marcel's math hour. Everyone welcome. Marcel smoothed the sign, then checked his watch. 6:45 a.m. He had agreed to an interview with Priya Patel, a passionate reporter from the city's education-focused news outlet, Channel 7 Learning Network. As he mopped toward the back corner, his thoughts drifted to the steep learning curve he had tackled just weeks earlier, and to the journey ahead. At 7 o'clock, Priya arrived, camera and boom mic in tow, followed by a small crew. They set up behind the student desks while Marcel finished sweeping the floor. He grabbed a clean piece of chalk and joined Mr. Caldwell at the board. The camera light glowed warmly. Marcel, Priya began, voice gentle but crisp. Thank you for agreeing to this interview before school starts. Marcel wiped his hands on his coveralls. Happy to, he replied, though his stomach did a small flip. Priya turned to the camera. We're here at Lincoln High School, where Marcel Thompson, longtime night janitor, has captured the community's imagination. Marcel, what inspired you to dive into calculus on your own? Marcel considered. I always loved learning, he said. When I was a kid, my mom helped me with grade school math. Later, I took night classes in algebra and trigonometry. Calculus felt intimidating, until Mr. Caldwell's challenge. After that, I realized I could figure it out step by step, like any puzzle. The crew panned across Marcel's neat board work. Substitutions, identities, and the final boxed result, pi 16/16. When the segment aired later that day, the caption read, From mop to math, how one man's determination rewrote his role. The broadcast caught the attention of more than curious neighbors. Jasmine Ortiz, Lincoln High's student council president and editor-in-chief of the school newspaper, The Lion's Roar, watched Marcel's interview on her home laptop. She leaned forward, eyes alight. Her editorial mission, to showcase underrepresented voices, found a perfect story. Jasmine drafted an email to Marcel. Subject: Feature story. Interview request. Dear Marcel, I'd like to feature your journey in the next edition of The Lion's Roar. Your story could inspire students who've never seen success in STEM fields. Would you meet with me after school? Sincerely, Jasmine Ortiz. Student council president Marcel's fingertip hovered over the reply button. A flurry of thoughts raced through his mind. Privacy, time commitments, the simple desire to remain behind the scenes. Yet he sensed that collaborating with Jasmine could amplify his mission, helping others believe in themselves. He typed back. Subject: Feature story, interview request. Dear Jasmine, thank you for reaching out. I'd be honored to speak with you. Let's meet in room 204 after school today. Best, Marcel. That afternoon, the hallway lights burned bright as students traded books for backpacks and began filing out of classrooms. Marcel slipped into room 204 and arranged chairs in a circle. He placed his mop in the corner, replaced by Jasmine's recorder and notebook. Moments later, Jasmine entered, her energy focused, her pen poised. Thanks for doing this, she said, settling in. I want to tell your story honestly, Marcel. What you've overcome, what you're building. Marcel nodded. I appreciate that. It's been a whirlwind. Over the next hour, Jasmine recorded details of Marcel's journey. His weekend scholarship from the local nonprofit. The moment he first held a chalk-dusty piece during Caldwell's challenge. The nights he stayed awake studying complex proofs under a dim desk lamp. She asked about his plans, college aspirations, his desire to tutor younger learners, and his vision for peer mentorship at Lincoln High. As the interview concluded, Jasmine smiled. This will run in next week's issue. I'm also pitching it to the city newspaper. Your story deserves a wider audience. Marcel shook her hand. Thank you, Jasmine. I want to help others see that it's never too late. True to her word, Jasmine's article filled the front page of the Lion's Roar the following Monday. Headlines declared, Breaking Boundaries, How Lincoln High's Janitor is Revolutionizing Student Success. The piece combined vivid photographs of Marcel at the board, quotes from grateful students like Devin and Kira, and a sidebar with information on upcoming peer tutoring signups. Within hours, requests poured in. Students dropped by room 204 asking to join Marcel's study group. The assistant principal sent an email praising the initiative and offering to coordinate room scheduling. Local businesses in the community reached out to donate calculators and graphing software. Even members of the school's math department, initially wary, entered room 204 with notebooks in hand, eager to observe Marcel's teaching style. One afternoon, Marcel stood before a dozen students reviewing an integration by parts problem. He patiently guided them through choosing UU and DV, drawing parallels to choosing tools for a repair job he might face as a janitor. Just like you pick the right wrench for a bolt, he explained. You pick the right part of the integral to differentiate or integrate. The students nodded, smiles spreading as they grasped the analogy. From across the room, Mr. Caldwell watched with pride and relief. He approached Marcel during a break. You've built something incredible, he said quietly. I underestimated what could come from a single challenge. Marcel shook his head. You gave me a chance. I just kept walking through each step. Behind them, Jasmine snapped a candid photo for the next edition. Marcel in mid-explanation, chalk in one hand. A diagram of the unit circle glowing behind him. As autumn deepened into early winter, Marcel found himself at the center of an unlikely alliance. He collaborated with Jasmine to develop math awareness events, partnered with the cafeteria staff to host Pi Day pie sales benefiting the tutoring fund, and joined forces with Mr. Caldwell to draft a proposal for a permanent peer mentorship program, complete with credit-earning volunteer hours for students who tutored their peers. For Marcel, these alliances represented more than institutional endorsements. They were proof that when individuals from different roles, janitor, teacher, student leader, came together around a shared vision, they could reshape the culture of an entire school. And in the glowing screens of phones, the lined pages of newspapers, and the energized chatter in hallways, Marcel saw the true power of community. People learning not just from textbooks, but from each other. Late one evening, as Marcel swept the cafeteria floor after a Pi Day fundraiser, he paused to catch his reflection in a stainless steel door. He straightened his coveralls and smoothed a stray curl of hair. Through the window behind him, classroom 204 glowed softly, with the silhouettes of Jasmine and Mr. Caldwell reviewing the next month's schedule. He smiled and resumed his work, confident that the alliances he had forged would carry Lincoln High's students toward new horizons, one equation at a time. Setbacks and spotlights. By mid-November, Lincoln High's hallways still hummed with the afterglow of Marcel Thompson's successes. His tutoring program, Marcel's Math Hour, had become a fixture of the school day, students meeting before first period, during lunch, and after classes to work through calculus problems under his guidance. The school administration, buoyed by improved test scores, had earmarked a modest budget to support the initiative, new whiteboard markers, binders of practice worksheets, and even a set of graphing calculators. But progress rarely follows a straight line. On a damp Tuesday evening, Marcel finished his night shift as usual, wheeling his mop bucket through the rear entrance. A dark sedan idled under a flickering street lamp. Two car-sick green policemen emerged, blinking at Marcel's coveralls. Marcel Thompson? One asked, flashing a badge. Marcel froze. Yes? We've had reports of suspicious activity here, the officer said, voice low. Someone saw a figure lurking around the parking lot late at night. The accusation stung. Marcel's routine shift never deviated from cleaning classrooms and corridors, yet he found himself explaining every step. Entering through the service door, checking supply closets, polishing trophy cases. The officers exchanged skeptical glances. "All right," the second officer sighed. "We'll let you get back to work, but keep your ID visible." Marcel nodded curtly, swallowing indignation, and wheeled his bucket inside. Word of the incident spread quietly. A few students passed along the rumor that Marcel was under investigation for trespassing. Some teachers shook their heads, but most offered a supportive nod when they spotted him. Still, Marcel felt a sudden chill, as though the warm spotlight that once shone upon him now flickered uncertainly. Back in classroom 204, Marcel arrived to wipe away chalk dust from the board. He stared at the smudged half-angle identity still visible in the corner. That same morning, Principal Hargrove had sent an email. Due to unexpected budget cuts, funding for after-school programs will be reduced by 50% starting next week. The tutoring program had been listed among those impacted. Marcel sat at Mr. Caldwell's desk, head in his hands. When Caldwell walked in, groggy from grading midterms, he paused. "What's wrong?" Marcel looked up. "They're cutting our budget. No more calculators. No new supplies." Caldwell rubbed his chin. "We anticipated this possibility. Let's think creatively. What do you propose?" Marcel drew a shaky breath. "I don't want to lose momentum. What if we move the program to the library during lunch? Use existing chairs and tables. Students could bring their own materials." Caldwell's eyes brightened. "That could work. And maybe we could ask the Parent-Teacher Association for a small grant?" Marcel nodded. "I'll draft a proposal." That afternoon, Marcel spent his study break in the library, tapping out an email to the PTA with a clear outline, objectives, anticipated outcomes, and a modest request for paper, pens, and perhaps 3 spare calculators. He attached testimonials from students whose confidence had soared. Within 48 hours, the PTA president replied, "Your initiative aligns perfectly with our goals. We'll earmark $200 for supplies." Marcel exhaled, relief washing over him. But the continual juggling of janitorial duties, college coursework, and fundraising had begun to take its toll. Late the next night, Marcel found himself in the empty counseling office, editing his proposal for a citywide adult education grant. Fatigue weighed on his eyelids. His fingers ached from hours of typing. He glanced at his reflection in the glass window. Dark circles under his eyes, coveralls that hadn't changed since his shift began, and a single smudge of chalk on his cheek. Doubt crept in. "How much longer can I keep this up?" he whispered. A ping on his phone jolted him, a message from Jasmine Ortiz. "Jasmine, don't forget tomorrow is the newspaper deadline. How's the article coming along?" "Marcel, almost done. Just proofreading the PTA proposal." "Jasmine, great. And remember, chocolate milk and naps." Marcel smiled despite himself. Jasmine's humor punctured the gloom, reminding him that he wasn't alone. Meanwhile, the rumor of Marcel's parking lot investigation had reached the Lion's Roar student newspaper. A brief, unverified blurb appeared. Sources say Marcel Thompson was questioned by police after hours. What was he doing in the lot? Comments erupted online. "He's hiding something. Poor guy can't catch a break. And I still think he's a hero." Meanwhile, the rumor of Marcel's parking lot investigation had reached the Lion's Roar student newspaper. A brief, unverified blurb appeared. Sources say Marcel Thompson was questioned by police after hours. What was he doing in the lot? Comments erupted online. "He's hiding something. Poor guy can't catch a break. And I still think he's a hero." On Monday, Marcel entered classroom 204 to find a student-led petition tacked to the door. "Save Marcel's math hour. Don't let budget cuts silence our tutor." Signatures covered the margins, teachers, custodians, and students alike. Marcel felt a surge of gratitude. The same community that had embraced him in the bright spotlight now rallied in his defense when shadows fell. That afternoon, in the library's makeshift tutoring corner, Marcel guided 3 freshmen through a chain rule problem. Graffiti-scarred tables and mismatched chairs surrounded them, but enthusiasm filled the air. When the bell rang, one of the freshmen, Carlos, turned to Marcel. "Thank you. he said earnestly. I was failing algebra 2 months ago. Marcel smiled. Keep practicing. You'll get there. As he packed up, the PTA liaison strode in bearing boxes of notebooks, pens, and 3 donated graphing calculators. Here, she said, unloading supplies onto the table. We're all behind you. That evening, Principal Hargrove hosted a short assembly in the gym. Students filled the bleachers as Hargrove took the stage, next to Mr. Caldwell. With a dramatic pause, he gestured toward Marcel, who stood near the bleachers in his coveralls. We face tough budget choices, Hargrove began, voice echoing. But some programs prove their worth instantaneously. Marcel's math hour has transformed our students' confidence and achievements. I'm happy to announce that we have found alternative funding to keep this program, and Marcel, right here at Lincoln High. A deafening cheer rose. Marcel felt the warmth of 1,000 smiles, hands clapping, and a few tears in the eyes of parents sitting in the front row. The spotlight returned, brighter, steadier, more genuine than before. Academic redemption. The morning frost coated the windows of Lincoln High School like delicate sugar crystals, and inside classroom 204, students gathered in anticipation. Today was the day the midterm calculus scores would be posted, the first true measure of collective progress since Marcel Thompson's unexpected entrance into the academic arena. Marcel arrived early, carrying his mop bucket through the back door, but instead of heading to janitorial closets, he paused outside the open classroom door, listening to the soft murmur of voices and the faint scratch of pencils on paper. By 8 a.m., the room was nearly full. Underclassmen perched on desk edges, seniors leaned together in hushed conversation, and a cluster of teachers stood at the back, notebooks in hand. The whiteboard glowed under fluorescent lights, now neatly divided, one side for pre-calculus review, and the other reserved for score release. Marcel set his bucket aside, cleared chalk dust from the board, and wrote in large letters, "Midterm calculus scores." "Remember," Mr. Caldwell called out, "these scores reflect cumulative effort. Mistakes are just steps toward mastery." A few nods rippled through the crowd. Marcel drew a deep breath. Students lined up to receive their graded exam booklets. When each name was called, a student stepped forward, glanced at the score in the top corner, and returned to a seat. Some faces fell, others lit up. Marcel watched Carlos, the freshman who had struggled with algebra until Marcel's tutoring. Carlos approached slowly, tore open the cover page, and stared. His eyes widened. He turned, beaming at Marcel, and gave a thumbs up before sliding back into his seat. Marcel smiled, and offered a discreet nod of pride. Next, Devon, the junior who had once considered dropping AP Calculus, bounded up. He flipped through the pages, grinned broadly, and shouted, 85%! "Thanks, Marcel." The class erupted in applause, and Devon made a mock bow. Marcel's cheeks warmed under the attention, but his handshake with Caldwell was firm and joyous. When the last name was called, Marcel slipped behind Mr. Caldwell's desk. He flipped over the post-it note covering his own results. Yes, his score was 89%. It was not perfect, but it symbolized his growth from hesitant substitute solver to confident scholar. He closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the achievement. As the room emptied, Principal Hargrove slipped quietly inside. The usual hush fell as he approached the front row. "I want to congratulate every one of you for your hard work," he said, voice steady. "But especially Mr. Thompson, who has shown us that curiosity and determination bridge any divide." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Your scores are a testament to the power of mentorship and community." Marcel nodded. His mop bucket stood incongruously beside the teacher's desk, a symbol of dual roles and the blending of boundaries. He looked at the students around him, some dabbing tears of relief, others chatting animatedly about college plans. This was redemption, both personal and collective. Later that afternoon, Marcel led an expanded review session in the library. Dozens of students filled folding chairs arranged in a semicircle. He wrote on the portable whiteboard, "Integration by parts, common pitfalls, and trig substitutions, when and why." Each topic sparked animated discussion. When a senior raised a hand to challenge his explanation, Marcel welcomed the question, drawing on the dynamic interchange to refine the group's understanding. At one point, Jasmine Ortiz dropped by with copies of that evening's special edition of The Lion's Roar. The front page headline screamed, "Lincoln High's Calculus Revolution, Scores Surge After Janitor's Tutoring." An accompanying chart compared average scores from the previous semester, 68%, to the current 84%. Students passed the newspapers around, pointing at names and percentages, all anchored by Marcel's smiling face. Marcel hesitated as he read the article's lead. When a routine classroom prank revealed hidden talent, the ripples reached far beyond simple chalk dust. Marcel Thompson's dedication has lifted the entire student body. He turned the page to find testimonials from fellow tutors, biology teachers, and cafeteria staff, each praising the tutoring program's impact on school culture. In the staff lounge that evening, Marcel joined the monthly faculty meeting. He was no longer just the janitor listening politely. He was a co-presenter. Mr. Caldwell introduced him. Marcel will walk us through best practices from the peer tutoring program. Marcel placed his mop bucket discreetly at the back. He clicked through a short slideshow. Program structure, student feedback, and next steps for expansion. A round of applause followed. After the meeting, Ms. Reynolds, the English teacher, approached. "I admit I was skeptical," she said, voice soft. "But I've never seen students so engaged." "Thank you, Marcel." He smiled. "We're in this together." Outside, the late November air nipped at Marcel's cheeks. As he gathered his supplies, Principal Hargrove appeared at the exit doors. "Marcel," he said, placing a folder in Marcel's hand. "This is an official award from the district's Board of Education, recognition of outstanding contribution to student achievement." Marcel opened the folder to reveal a certificate bearing the district seal and a handwritten note. "To Marcel Thompson, whose unexpected excellence inspired us all." Words failed him. He simply shook Hargrove's hand, glancing down at his mop bucket and back to the principal. "I couldn't have done it without support," Marcel managed. The next morning, the entire school gathered in the auditorium for a special assembly. The superintendent joined Principal Hargrove on stage, alongside Mr. Caldwell and Jasmine Ortiz. At the sound of Marcel's name, the auditorium rose in a standing ovation that echoed off the walls. Marcel, dressed in clean khaki pants and a button-down shirt, his janitorial coveralls replaced for the occasion, stepped to the microphone, the certificate in hand. He cleared his throat. "I never expected any of this. I came here to do my job, to clean floors and leave classrooms ready for the next day. But when I was challenged, I saw an opportunity to learn." He paused, looking around at every face. "This award isn't just mine. It belongs to every student who showed up to study, every teacher who encouraged a peer, and to Mr. Caldwell, who believed in me, and to Jasmine, who helped tell our story." A ripple of applause followed each acknowledgement. Marcel continued, voice firmer now. "We all have potential in unexpected places. Don't let others or even your own doubts limit you. When we challenge ourselves, and each other, we discover what we're truly capable of." As he stepped off the stage, Principal Hargrove met him with an embrace. "You've redeemed not only your own story, Marcel, but the expectations for our entire student body," he said. Back in classroom 204 that afternoon, Marcel returned to his mop and bucket. He looked at the chalkboard, now dust-free and ready for the next lesson. Though he had tasted the spotlight and signed awards, his true satisfaction lay in the quiet moments. A freshman's breakthrough on a complex problem, the determined scribble of notes in a student's workbook, or the simple nod of gratitude from a tired evening custodian. In the soft glow of the setting sun, Marcel swept the floor one last time, knowing that redemption was not a final destination but a journey of perseverance. And as long as he carried chalk in one hand and a mop in the other, he would continue to bridge worlds. One formula, one student, and one sweeping gesture of hope at a time. Redefining identity. As December's early dusk settled over Lincoln High, Marcel Thompson paused at the top of the grand staircase in the main lobby. Around him, holiday decorations twinkled. A makeshift evergreen by the front entrance, strings of white lights outlining lockers, and a banner proclaiming Seasons of Learning. Yet Marcel's thoughts were far from festive. He surveyed the familiar scene through a new lens, one in which he was no longer just the night janitor, but something more. A tutor, a scholar, and an unexpected symbol of possibility. Earlier that week, Marcel had completed his application to State University's 4-year mathematics program. He had labored over essays late into the night, describing the moment he first substituted XXX with sin theta on Mr. Caldwell's board, and the pride he felt when students first thanked him for explaining the chain rule. He had requested letters of recommendation from teachers, administrators, and even a handful of students whose grades had soared under his guidance. Now, that application, and the scholarship from the community college, hung in the balance, determining whether his identity would shift again. The bell rang, summoning his attention back to the hall. Students streaming down the stairs paused to greet him. Some offered shy smiles, others tacked personalized thank you notes onto the bulletin board outside room 204. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. See you at math hour." Their voices meshed into a chorus of affirmation. Marcel nodded to each, letting the warmth of their gratitude settle around him. He entered classroom 204, which smelled faintly of chalk and cleaner. Under fluorescent glow, the whiteboard displayed the day's agenda: advanced techniques, improper integrals, and convergence. Marcel set his mop beside his desk and gathered his teaching materials: colored markers, graph paper, and a stack of practice problems. A dozen students already waited, notebooks open, pencils poised. "Good afternoon, everyone," Marcel said, voice steady. He scanned the group. Kira, whose confidence had blossomed since Chapter 3. Carlos, whose algebra skills now rivaled many seniors. Devin, a senior engineering hopeful preparing for his SATs. And a handful of new faces pulled in by the buzz of the tutoring program. For all their varied backgrounds, they shared a common purpose: to learn. As they worked through the day's examples, Marcel noticed something he had not expected: shifts in the students' perceptions of him. In earlier weeks they had seen him as an authority figure stepping out of place. Now they treated him as a peer among educators. During a particularly tricky question on testing convergence of the integral 11x p dx, several students collaborated, calling Marcel over to confirm their reasoning. When he explained that the integral converges for p greater than 1 by comparing it to a p-series, their eyes lit with understanding. Kira turned to him and said, "Thanks, Marcel. You make these abstract ideas feel tangible." After the session, Marcel gathered his things and headed to the gymnasium for the evening's community holiday concert. He was slated to speak briefly at the start, a new honor. In his dressed-down khakis and collared shirt, his presentable garb, he looked more like a teacher than the coveralls of his nightly routine ever would. Yet even as he ascended the steps to the stage, he carried the weight of both roles: the janitor's humility and the tutor's confidence. The gym buzzed with chatter. Parents, students, faculty, and local residents filled the bleachers. String lights cast a warm glow over the polished hardwood. The student choir concluded their opening carol, and the principal, decked in festive red, stepped to the podium. "Before we continue," Principal Hargrove announced, "we have a special guest whose impact this year has transcended job descriptions and inspired us all." He gestured toward Marcel, who made his way to center stage as the audience erupted in applause. Marcel's heart pounded as he gripped the podium. He looked out over familiar faces, some blurred in the light, others clear, a mix of custodians, teachers, students he had tutored, and the parents of those students. He took a deep breath. "I'm humbled by your kindness," he began, voice soft but unwavering. "When I started here as the night janitor, my role seemed simple: clean, maintain, stay unseen. But through challenges, like that calculus problem on the board, I discovered I could contribute more, that we all have layers to our abilities." He paused, reflecting on how his identity had unfurled piece by piece. "I realized I'm both the keeper of clean floors and the guide through integrals. Neither title alone defines me." A ripple of appreciative murmurs passed through the crowd. Marcel continued, "To the students, Remember that your potential isn't limited by labels. To the staff and community, thank you for embracing me beyond my uniform. He concluded. May we all honor every person's hidden talents and lift each other to new heights. The applause this time was thunderous. Marcel stepped off the stage, cheeks warm, and returned to his seat among the custodial staff, feeling for the first time fully included. In the days that followed, Marcel's dual identity became a topic of reflection throughout Lincoln High. At the weekly staff meeting, teachers discussed how to recognize and nurture talent in unexpected places. Mr. Caldwell proposed a new mentorship initiative pairing faculty and students in cross-disciplinary projects, an idea sparked by Marcel's journey. In the cafeteria staff added math hour flyers alongside lunch menus, signaling their support. Meanwhile, at home, Marcel faced his own internal reckoning. He demolished a microwave burrito for dinner, then sat at his kitchen table, reviewing acceptance letters. On the refrigerator door hung a collage, photos of tutoring sessions, Jasmine's newspaper clippings, and a small poster reading, "Keep going." He opened his email to find 2 new messages, one from State University's admissions office, the other from the scholarship committee. With trembling fingers, he clicked each. The first message began, "Congratulations. We are pleased to offer you admission." Marcel's breath caught. He scanned the rest. An invitation to join the honors mathematics program and details on merit-based aid. Then he opened the scholarship email. Awarded the Dean's Transfer Scholarship in recognition of your outstanding academic turnaround. The scholarship would cover tuition, books, and a small stipend for living expenses. His eyes blurred. In that moment, Marcel felt himself evolve once more, from janitor to scholar in training. Yet he also knew that leaving Lincoln High at the end of the semester would be bittersweet. He had invested his time and heart in these students and in transforming the school's culture. The next morning, Marcel returned to room 204 in his coveralls as usual. He found a small gathering of students waiting, clustered near his mop bucket and chalkboard. Kira held an envelope. She handed it to Marcel. "Open it," she urged, bright smile lighting her face. Marcel peeled the seal. Inside was a hand-drawn card signed by the entire tutoring group. "For Marcel, our mentor, our friend. Thank you for believing in us." Tucked inside was a gift card to the campus bookstore. Tears pricked Marcel's eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, voice catching. The students gathered around, placing hands on his shoulders. For a moment, roles vanished. Janitor, tutor, student, left behind in shared respect and affection. That afternoon, Marcel met with Principal Hargrove to discuss his transition plan. They outlined a timeline for training a successor to lead the tutoring program after his departure. Marcel suggested appointing 2 student co-leaders to ensure continuity. Hargrove nodded approvingly. In his final week at Lincoln High, Marcel balanced packing personal belongings with teaching last lessons on Taylor series and convergence tests. He wore both coveralls and a borrowed blazer on alternate days, symbols of 2 intertwined identities. On his final tutoring session, many of the original members gathered in a circle. Marcel unrolled a final problem set, a comprehensive review combining every technique they had learned. As they solved integrals together, laughter and camaraderie filled the room. When the last problem was done, they presented Marcel with a small chalkboard painted with the inscription, "Marcel's Math Hour, established 2024. Marcel felt a gentle ache in his chest. He picked up the chalkboard and, with a steady hand, added beneath it the words, "Never stop discovering." As students cheered, he realized that identity was not fixed, but an ongoing narrative, one he would carry forward to State University and beyond. When he finally swept the last corner of classroom 204 and locked the door behind him, Marcel breathed in the stillness. His mop bucket rested quietly in the supply closet, ready for the next night's work. Tomorrow, his path would lead elsewhere. But inside him lived the lessons of Lincoln High. That identity evolves through challenge, community, and the courage to believe that we are always more than we first appear. The community response. The week after Marcel Thompson's award ceremony, Lincoln High School felt electrified with possibility. Word of the janitor turned tutor turned scholar traveled fast, reaching beyond the city limits to neighboring towns and even the state capital. It was on a crisp Thursday morning that Marcel received the first invitation from outside the school, an official request to speak at a community education summit at City Hall. Marcel read the email twice before it fully registered. The letterhead bore the seal of the municipal government, and the opening lines were formal. Dear Mr. Thompson, we would be honored if you would address our annual Community Education Summit on December 15th to share your story of perseverance, mentorship, and academic transformation. Your journey has inspired countless individuals in our region, and we believe your insights could help shape future programs and policies. Sincerely, Director, Office of Lifelong Learning. His heart raced. Speaking in front of a student group was one thing. Addressing civic leaders and policymakers was another level entirely. He forwarded the invitation to Principal Hargrove, who encouraged him to accept. This is your chance to influence education beyond Lincoln High, Hargrove wrote back. In the days that followed, Marcel prepared. He gathered testimonials from students, parents, and teachers. Handwritten notes, expressing gratitude for how his tutoring had changed lives. He polished his speech, weaving together anecdotes. The calculus problem that ignited his journey, late-night study sessions in a dim apartment, and the moment he realized that teaching others was as rewarding as solving problems himself. Meanwhile, back at Lincoln High, excitement rippled through the community. Jasmine Ortiz featured the upcoming summit in the Lion's Roar, complete with details on where community members could watch a live webcast. Posters went up in the cafeteria and community centers. See Marcel Thompson speak on education innovation. Parents called the school office, inquiring how to attend or tune in online. On the morning of December 15th, Marcel suited up in a navy blazer, crisp shirt, and slacks, his cleanest non-janitorial attire. He arrived early at the grand stone steps of City Hall, its columns draped with festive garlands of winter greenery. Camera crews from the local news station set up tripods on the sidewalk. Reporters milled around, microphones in hand, waiting for Marcel's arrival. Inside the marble foyer, Marcel found a small green room reserved for speakers. He paced the carpeted floor, glancing at his notes and taking deep breaths. Through the curtained door, he could hear the murmur of the assembled audience, educators, nonprofit leaders, city council members, and dozens of adult learners who recognized him from morning news segments. A staff assistant entered, offering a glass of water. 10 minutes, Mr. Thompson, she said kindly. You'll follow the superintendent and precede the State Secretary of Education. Marcel nodded. He steadied his reflection in the mirror, smoothed his hair, and dared a small smile. When the time arrived, an usher led Marcel onto the stage of the ornate council chamber. The room fell silent as he approached the podium. Rows of burgundy seats were filled with expectant faces. Behind him, the city's coat of arms gleamed under spotlights. A hush settled as Marcel gripped the lectern. Good morning, he began, voice steady but heartfelt. He paused, making eye contact with the front row, a group of adult students who flashed encouraging smiles. I am honored and humbled to speak before you today. My name is Marcel Thompson, and I used to be Lincoln High School's night janitor. A ripple of applause filled the chamber. Marcel continued, recounting how a spontaneous classroom challenge revealed strengths he never knew he had. He spoke of the dozens of students who showed up to Marcel's math hour, before and after school, determined to tackle integrals and series alongside someone they once viewed as staff. He shared stories of fresh-faced freshmen now thriving in STEM classes, and how local businesses and the PTA rallied to support a grassroots tutoring program. Throughout the speech, Marcel wove in statistics. A 20 percentage point jump in average calculus scores, a doubling of advanced math enrollment, and dozens of adult learners signing on to community college bridge programs. He credited these gains to mentorship, collaboration, and the belief that education should be accessible to all, regardless of age, job title, or background. At the conclusion, Marcel proposed a blueprint for the city's lifelong learning initiatives. Peer-led tutoring networks, empowering students and volunteers to teach one another, fostering leadership, and deepening mastery. Flexible learning spaces, repurposing existing community rooms and libraries for evening and weekend classes, accessible to working adults. Public-private partnerships, encouraging local businesses to sponsor equipment, textbooks, and scholarships, reinforcing that education benefits the whole community. Recognition of unconventional educators, honoring individuals who contribute to learning outside formal roles, ensuring that a school custodian or a community volunteer can be celebrated alongside professional teachers. When Marcel finished, the chamber erupted in sustained applause, rising to a standing ovation. The State Secretary of Education approached him on stage, shaking his hand warmly. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "your insights will guide our statewide rollout of community education grants next year." Following the summit, news coverage flooded social media and local papers. The story ran under headlines like, "Janitor turned speaker shapes city's education policy," and, "From chalk dust to City Hall, Marcel Thompson's vision." A profile on the evening news highlighted Marcel's blend of humility and ambition, and community leaders praised the practical lessons he had shared. Back at Lincoln High, the ripple effects were immediate. The school district approved a pilot program modeled after Marcel's math hour, extending peer tutoring to English and science courses. District-wide budgets allocated funds for flexible use classrooms. The city announced a new annual Thompson Fellowship for adult learners, combining tuition support with mentorship training. In the midst of this triumph, Marcel stayed grounded in small acts. One afternoon, he joined a lunchtime tutoring circle in the library, swapping stories and problem-solving with students who had once helped him solve integrals back in classroom 204. A visiting reporter from the state newspaper asked for a photo. Marcel paused, glanced at the mop bucket tucked beside the whiteboard, then rolled it forward. In the photo, he stood between two smiling high school juniors, mop bucket in one hand and graduation cap in the other, an emblem of his dual identity. That evening, Marcel returned home to his modest apartment and found an envelope on his kitchen table. Inside was an invitation from the nonprofit that had originally sponsored his community college tuition, a formal offer to join their board of directors as community ambassador for adult education. The letter noted that Marcel's lived experience, balancing work, study, and community service, made him uniquely qualified to guide their outreach efforts. Marcel leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. He thought of the moment he first wrote x equals sin theta on that dusty board and the journey that had followed. His life had shifted from routine cleaning runs to corridors of power and civic influence. Yet in every role, janitor, tutor, scholar, speaker, he remained committed to one principle: that learning is a shared endeavor, and that individuals should never be defined by a single job description. The next morning, as Marcel entered Lincoln High for a final seasonal round of tutoring before winter break, the halls were quieter than usual, decorated with holiday lights. But near room 204, students waited for him with practice exams and boxes of donated pens. A banner overhead read, "The Thompson Effect. Keep it going." Marcel smiled, setting down his mop bucket and rolling out his whiteboard. He thought back to City Hall and the applause that echoed off marble walls. Now, in this humble corner of his former workplace, he felt the true pulse of community, the eager scratch of pencils, the collaborative banter, and the everyday miracles of learning. And as he wrote the day's problem on the board, an improper integral requiring a clever substitution, he knew that the community response was not simply applause in a grand chamber, but the ongoing commitment of students, parents, teachers, and neighbors to lift each other toward mastery. That was the real legacy of his journey, and the promise he would carry forward, wherever his path led next. The next horizon. Spring sunlight filled the quad at State University, dappling the walkways with warmth and promise. Marcel Thompson stepped onto the campus grounds for the first time as a full-time mathematics major, his backpack slung over one shoulder and a copy of Rudden's Principles of Mathematical Analysis peeking from its side pocket. Gone were the well-worn coveralls of Lincoln High's night janitor. In their place, crisp jeans and a button-down shirt signified a new chapter. Yet tucked inside his bag, alongside notebooks and pens, was a small piece of chalk, an emblem of the journey that had brought him here. Just weeks earlier, Marcel had stood on the stage of Lincoln High's auditorium delivering his valedictory address as community college valedictorian. Caps had flown, applause had thundered, and Mr. Caldwell and Principal Hargrove had beamed from the front row. Now, Marcel breathed deeply, absorbing the hum of students passing between lecture halls, the excited chatter of study groups forming under flowering trees, and the distant call of a campus bell tower. His first class, Introduction to Real Analysis, was in a stately building with high ceilings and arched windows. He found seat 12C, set down his bag, and placed the piece of chalk beside his notebook. The professor, Dr. Nguyen, introduced herself, then wrote the day's topic on the board. Epsilon Delta, Definitions of Limits. Marcel's pulse quickened at the sight. He remembered the first time he grappled with limits in classroom 204, chalk dust swirling around his fingers as he hesitated before making his substitution. Now, armed with the same determination and a richer perspective, he leaned forward to engage fully. Over the next fortnight, Marcel settled into campus life. Mornings began with lecture notes scribbled on crisp paper. Afternoons were devoted to problem sets in the library's high-backed chairs, and evenings found him in group study sessions with peers, sometimes in the student union lounge, other times back in classroom 204, which he had arranged to use whenever he visited Lincoln High for tutoring alumni. Word of his arrival had preceded him. Several Lincoln High graduates now attended State University and sought him out for guidance on challenging coursework. Marcel welcomed them, offering familiarity and reassurance amid the rigor of higher mathematics. Outside academics, Marcel maintained ties to both worlds. On weekends, he returned to Lincoln High to mentor emerging tutors, students who had stepped into his role leading math hour after his departure. He offered advice on lesson planning, shared techniques for managing diverse learners, and encouraged them to pursue their own educational goals. In gratitude, they presented him with a framed photo of Classroom 204's whiteboard from that first day, the original integral still visible in chalk. Marcel hung it above his apartment desk, a reminder of how far a single challenge could carry him. Meanwhile, at State University, Marcel became active in the Math Peer Mentorship Program. He volunteered to coach incoming freshmen struggling with pre-calculus, drawing on his unique experience of bridging basic math to advanced concepts. His background as both tutor and student gave him empathy. He knew the frustration of a difficult proof and the exhilaration of finally seeing a pattern emerge. Academically, Marcel excelled. By midterm, he had earned top marks in real analysis and abstract algebra, impressing professors with his insights during office hour discussions. He began assisting Dr. Nguyen as a teaching assistant, leading recitation sections and grading proofs. Each time he wrote feedback, praise for a clear argument or guidance on tightening a contradiction. He thought back to how Mr. Caldwell's encouraging comment had ignited his confidence on that dusty classroom board. As May approached, Marcel faced another milestone, the annual State University Undergraduate Research Symposium. Encouraged by Dr. Nguyen, he submitted an abstract on his independent study, exploring novel proofs of convergence for certain improper integrals, inspired by techniques he had first practiced in Lincoln High's tutoring sessions. His proposal was accepted, and he prepared a poster presentation and slide deck, determined to honor the place where his passion had first taken root. On the day of the symposium, the campus ballroom teemed with students and faculty. Marcel's poster was titled, Extensions of Convergence Criteria for Generalized P-Series. Attendees paused as he explained how drawing analogies between janitorial tools and mathematical operations, wrenches for substitutions, sieves for convergence tests, helped demystify complex proofs. His approachable style drew both applause and thoughtful questions. A faculty panel commended his clarity and originality, noting the practical grounding of his work. It was a far cry from the tentative chalk dust-covered beginnings of his journey, yet Marcel acknowledged every step along the way. Shortly after the symposium, Marcel received an unexpected invitation, a return trip to Lincoln High to deliver the commencement address at their spring graduation. Principal Hargrove's email read, Dear Marcel, you have come full circle. From janitor to valedictorian to scholar. It would mean the world to our graduates if you could speak at their ceremony on June 5th. Please join us to inspire the next cohort. Warm regards. Principal Hargrove. Marcel paused in the quad breeze, heart swelling. He replied immediately with gratitude and acceptance. On June 5th, wearing a cap and gown atop his coveralls, an intentional nod to his past, Marcel mounted the stage at Lincoln High's outdoor amphitheater. Rows of students sat before him, diplomas in hand, parents and teachers looking on. He took a moment to let the scene settle. The flutter of graduation caps, the gentle hum of applause as names were called, the sun's golden glow illuminating faces full of expectation. When it was his turn, Marcel approached the lectern. He cleared his throat and began. Fellow graduates, faculty, families, and friends. Today, we celebrate endings and beginnings. Years ago, this school was my workplace. My job was to clean floors, replace bulbs, and stay out of sight. Yet one day, a simple joke, solve this integral, unveiled a path I never imagined. He recounted the pivotal moment, the weeks of tutoring, and the community that had lifted him. He spoke of how identity is not confined to a title, but is shaped by actions, choices, and willingness to learn. Whether you wear a cap, a gown, or coveralls, your potential lies within, he said. Embrace challenges, seek collaboration, and never let a single role define your horizon. When he concluded, the crowd rose in thunderous applause. Mr. Caldwell and Principal Hargrove stood in the front row, faces shining with pride. In that moment, Marcel saw both past and future converge. The boy who held chalk for the first time in classroom 204 and the scholar presenting research at State University, all connected by the community that believed in him. As the ceremony ended, students and families gathered to congratulate him. Parents shared how their children's lives had changed through peer tutoring. Juniors asked for college advice. Faculty invited him to speak again next year. Marcel listened, humbled by the impact of his story. That evening, back in his apartment, Marcel placed his graduation stole and cap on a hook by the door. He opened a new notebook labeled Research Journal, Graduate Studies, a promise of further exploration. Then he picked up the small piece of chalk, turned to the blank wall, and wrote a final message. We are defined not by roles, but by possibilities. Keep writing your own equations. He stepped back, traced his finger over the words, and smiled. As night fell over the campus and Lincoln High in the distance, Marcel Thompson closed one chapter and prepared to write the next, confident that every integral, every lesson, and every community he touched would guide him toward horizons yet undiscovered.